Welcome, everybody. In the interest of time, we'll get things started this evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And since I missed last month to have Dr. Shane recognize his 1 year with us, I'd like him to give us or lead us in the pledge tonight.
Pleasure. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move that we adopt the agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That leads us right into the superintendent's report.
All right, very good. I've got a few things to share with you before we launch into the Quality Education Act presentation by Luke Maryville, which was a request from the board last meeting. So just a couple of things. The first one is we've received 3 responses to our request for proposals for a local attorney. And so Angela, I opened those up today. We reviewed each 3, and of course, you're welcome to look at those if you'd like. We're recommending that the board interview 2. And we'd like to accomplish that at the retreat as a part of the agenda for that the board have an opportunity to interview those attorneys. And then if it's possible, we'd like to ask for an action item to engage that attorney so that they can be ready to work in September. So that's an important piece, I think, that's before us. And then I've prepared, and then this is just a draft, okay? So we'll pass these around. The annual retreat, I think that's, and just some ideas that I was thinking in terms of an agenda. So you'll notice that.
A short one.
It's okay, Larry and I can share. We're good.
I'll take a chance.
Okay, so there's an ISBA training. We'd like to have them come.
Yeah.
And we've made that arrangement, so they're planning to be with us. And then you'll notice on items E through G, those would be director reports, and we just asked them to do a brief report on their work that they've been doing for the past year and then over the summer. Then also, we're looking to not only work with ISBA, but we'd like to get Richard Schroeder on Zoom and talk about strategic planning for a little bit. Not only what we accomplished at our retreat for the administrators, but what that's going to look like in terms of next steps for staff as well as for the board. And what it is that we would be doing moving forward. And we got a lot of good feedback from our principals regarding that retreat and the things that were accomplished. We got some good things done. And so we think that would be of value. Let's see, what else do I have here? I think after Richard's finished, I'd like to engage with the board about superintendent board goals for 22-23. One of the things that we were able to do at the retreat was to set the HRS goals recommendations for as a whole. And I'm pretty pleased to report that all the schools remaining for level 1 have stated that they would like to be level 1 by the end of the year. And then we have, I think, 5, I want to make sure I'm right with that, 5 schools have decided that they would like to be level 2, 1 that will seek level 3, and level 4 and 5. So we're really happy to tell you that there'll be lots of focus and lots of energy on moving HRS forward again another year. So that's pretty exciting. So we'll talk about some other goals as well. The continuous improvement plans in front of us again. And part of our retreat was to, as a group, as a whole, set those continuous improvement plan goals. And one of the things we talked a lot about was meet or exceed state average in each of those growth goals that we have. So more to come on that, but I'd like to at least engage in that type of discussion. Other things that I would bring to your attention, of course, on this list, there's more than can be done. Just recommendations, and I want you to think about it before we get it set. But One of the things is section 1, we're hoping will be available for board policy review. Jess is working hard with ISBA, and we think that we'll have that ready. So we'd like to present that to you for approval, that, or at least first reading approval as a proposal that day. And then finally, I think it would be a good idea if we toured some buildings. I think it might help as far as our efforts with the bond goes if we went over and looked at Skyline, and walked through there and asked Josh and his staff to show us things that need a good look. I think we probably need to go over and look at CTE again, and see the progress that's been made, where we're at. There's been a whole lot of progress made in the last 3 or 4 weeks since we received the permit, and they're hustling. And we'll have, we believe, some access to it when school starts. So that's progress made in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I want you to see what it looks like now, and we're pretty excited for the progress that's been there since we received. If you'd like, of course, you could go out to Grafton right now, but maybe it might be a good idea to walk out there and see some of the great work that's been done. We did our walkthrough today with Hellas for the turf portion of it, and noticed some things that needed some addressing, and they have already done it. So they're working very, very hard at it right now. So the turf situation is nearly 100% complete. And I'd love for you guys to go out there and have a first look at it. So
I watched some progress on Saturday.
did you?
Yeah.
All right.
It was an interesting process. But
The football in
Did you
the
get
car.
a chance to go look at it?
Go toss the ball around after the meeting. You and Larry.
Of course.
Just a list of recommendations. So we've obviously not set an agenda for this yet. It's a little early. If you have other ideas, I'd love to entertain those. Again, it's a 12 to 4 type of window.
Okay, that was
On
one
the
of my
first
questions.
day of
Is that what you're
school.
looking for is 4-ish?
That's
I
what's
don't
on
care
it.
if we go on 12 to 9. I just like
I
wanting
need
to,
to know.
yeah, just to know. Do you have an idea, or is that kind of what you're shooting, is 4 or 5?
Well, I'd like to shoot for that. I always think 5-6 hour meetings are, they speak for themselves, but the issue would be that we get a lot of the discussion, goal setting, reviews done early. And then I would suggest that we get in the van or get in a bus or however you'd like to travel and go see the things in the district that I think need review. And that's just my thinking. Okay. All right. So my last item for my report before we get to Quality Education Act is enrollment. And I've asked Dan and Kelly to share where we're at today with our enrollment at our elementary schools and secondary schools. Kelly, would you start?
Sure, absolutely. Do you want just the total or you want by school?
Let's just walk through totals, and then I would say areas of concern that you have first, and then some of the other schools.
So kindergarten district-wide, right now, we're at 659. First grade, we're at 807. Second grade, 742. Third grade, 725. Fourth grade, 746. Fifth grade, 767. Sixth grade, 696. So a total of 5,142. The first day of school last year, we were at 5,279. And we do still have registration tomorrow, and then we always get kids on the first day. So we still expect that to go up. And even continuing, even though registration ends tomorrow, people still come in. A couple areas of concern. Sunnyside, 5th grade, we have 4 classes, and we try to keep the class size about 28, and all 4 classes have 30. And we have, sorry, I really need glasses. We have 4 5th graders that haven't been placed yet that might be overflowed. Or no, sorry, we have 7 from Sunnyside. Longfellow, their 5th grade, there's 3 classes, and they also have 30 in all 3. And that's the one that has 4 more students that still have to be placed. And then first grade at Longfellow, we try to keep it around 26, and we're at 28 in all 3 classes. Kindergarten at Sunnyside and Longfellow is we're over by 1 in each of. We like to be 25 at Sunnyside. We're at 26 in all 3. Longfellow, we're at 24, 24, and 25, so we're right there. And the other One is first grade at Westside. We have 3 classes of 26, and that's what we like it to. We try to stay around there, but we have 7 that haven't been placed yet. They'll have to be overflowed. So those are kind of the key areas. Any questions about that?
What was the number for last year?
5,279 on the first day.
First
We
day.
ended at 5,202.
Ended at 202, 52.
And how many do we have right now, total?
5,142.
Roughly down at 130, give or take, year over year.
And I will tell you, in those numbers that I said that there's some kids that haven't been placed yet, they are not in that total because they're not in Power School yet. So you probably have another 20. But like I said, we'll still get more registrations. And the first day of school, we have a lot of like, oh crud, school starts today. We better go. So we get some of that.
It happens.
Yeah.
Sounds like first day, 2 a days.
Right. It starts.
So this is as of today.
Yeah. As of
The
today.
numbers from last year were as of
Of
school
the
starting.
first day.
So
Yeah.
we still have X number of days before.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that we'll at least probably get to where we were
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what the
Anticipate
growth factor is. There are certain schools that parents really do wait till the last minute to come to school and register. There are some that we will have an influx even after the parents. So it's just one of the cultural items that exists. But I appreciate Kelly letting you guys know where we're at today with elementary. Dan,
Okay, I'm gonna go by school. Start with the 7th and 8th grade. Eagle Rock Middle School, 7th grade has 393, and I've not totaled these up yet, so I might total them as you go, but I have a pretty good idea of where we were last year and where we're gonna be now. The 8th grade at Eagle Rock is 407 as of today. So they have 800 students, which is a little bit less than they started with last year by probably, Ethan, what, 50? 50 or 60 kids. So they're down a little bit at this point. Still have 3 weeks. So Taylorview has 412 in their 7th grade, 369 in the 8th grade for 781, which is up a little bit from last year. I think they started about 760 last year. Idaho Falls High School, 9th grade 375, 10th 390, 11th 288. 12th grade, 344 for a total of 1397. So that's quite a bit from
3
last
up
year.
from this morning when I registered my daughter, when Nick Emmett was showing me. He's
I
like,
think that's-
number.
Chris, at about 100 more than we started last year.
Last year we started at 1299.
So it's about 100 kids.
70 more than you ended with.
It's a good problem. Hopefully they'll all show up first day of school. I don't know where we're gonna put them, but there. Skyline High School, 9th grade, 356, 10th grade, 364, 11th grade, 305, 12th grade, 297, for a total of 1322, which is pretty close to where we were last year, the first of the year. And I'm not sure what we ended up last year.
1299.
So just up a little bit from the ending. Emerson Alternative has 1 9th grader, 3 10th graders, 11th grade has 24 kids, 12th grade has 62 kids for a total of 90. And they will see an increase in the next 3 weeks. Compass Academy, which is, they're having a good problem there. 9th grade 142, 10th grade 113, 11th grade 122, 12th grade 118 for a total of 495. So they're probably up 50 kids from last year.
Yeah.
At the start of the year. So numbers look good in the secondary. Spots.
thank you. Any questions?
Lot of kids.
Next up is Luke Mayville. Luke, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Could you all? Should I jump right into it?
Yes.
Can someone give me just a quick mention of the time I should hold myself to?
Can you do this in 10, 15 minutes, do you think? Or do you need more
Yes.
than that?
That would be good. Would that include time for any questions? Or would it be?
We can add a little for questions, yeah.
Okay. Well, let me jump right in. I'm Luke Mayville. I am co-founder of Reclaim Idaho. We're an organization that started up in North Idaho back in 2017. And our big start was when we spearheaded the successful campaign to expand Medicaid in Idaho. So we had one thing that some people aren't aware of, however, is that before we started the Medicaid expansion campaign, the first thing we ever worked on together, just in the small, community of Sandpoint and the surrounding area, which is where I grew up, the first thing we worked on was just the passage of a local school levy, a supplemental levy for the Lake Pend Oreille School District. That's what originally brought me into the work, was just joining with a few old friends who had also attended the public schools in Lake Pend Oreille School District. And it was really looking like the supplemental levy might fail. And we were really worried about that because I believe it made up about a quarter to a third of the operating budget for the district. So we got involved and we put together a door-to-door campaign to pass that local levy. After having some success with that really small scale local campaign, that was when we decided to try to do something similar for one of the major problems facing the state, which was the Medicaid gap problem of tens of thousands of people who just didn't have access to health care. And that led us to start Reclaim Idaho and spearhead the signature drive, which eventually a number of other organizations joined in on. And then when that went to the ballot in 2018, the Medicaid Expansion Initiative won with about 61% of the vote. And it won the majority of the vote in about 35 out of 44 counties, I believe. After the success of Medicaid expansion, we decided to really turn around and go back to where we started and see if we could try to address the school funding problem at the state level. We were very familiar with the impact it was having at the local level and the way that so many school districts across the state were reliant and in our view, over-reliant on supplemental levies. So we wanted to see if we could do something at the state level, and that's the origin of our current initiative, the Quality Education Act. And I'll describe just the nuts and bolts of what's in the initiative and what it does. But first, I'll just give you a quick timeline. We started collecting signatures to put the Quality Education Act on the ballot well over a year ago in June of 2021. We collected over 100,000 signatures. The vast majority of our signatures were collected by local volunteers working in local teams all around the state. You might have encountered some of the local volunteers in Idaho Falls who worked really hard to collect thousands of signatures in and around Idaho Falls. Together, statewide, about 25 to 30 local volunteer teams collected over 100,000 signatures. We turned those in to the Secretary of State. Just back in July, in early July. Since then, just a couple weeks ago, the initiative was officially certified for the ballot because we not only met the total signature requirement that we needed, we also met the requirement of getting a large number of signatures in each of 18 legislative districts around the state, including District 33, Idaho Falls. So that means that the Quality Education Act initiative will appear on the November ballot in the upcoming November general election and it will appear as Proposition 1. Okay, so what does the Quality Education Act do? What are the basic contents of it? It would increase funding for K through 12 education in Idaho by an estimated $323 million a year. And I'll just note really quickly that there's dispute about this from the opponents of the initiative. And some of you may have questions about that I could speak to later. We believe that they're clearly wrong in their analysis, and that what the initiative would do is exactly what it was designed to do, and what the governor's office actually analyzed it and concluded it would do, which is raise about $323 million a year for K-12 public education. That money is distributed out to public school districts and public charters on a per student basis, and it adds up to just over, I believe, $1,000 per student, right in that ballpark, and it goes out to local districts, and the money must be spent on a list of permitted expenses that are listed clearly in the initiative. You can find the full list at qualityed.org, the website for the initiative. But just to give you a rough sense of what's in the list, most of it falls under two main categories, which is better pay for teachers and support staff, number one, and more funding for programs that are underfunded, at number two. And some of the programs listed in the initiative include career technical education, arts, music, and drama, special education, and full day kindergarten, which is since we first drafted the initiative, there's been more funding passed by the legislature for full day kindergarten, so that may not be as urgent of an issue, but that just gives you a sense of the range of programs that the funding can go towards. We've also put in the initiative that efforts to reduce classroom sizes is a permitted expense, and also classroom materials, ideally to help mitigate the problem that we've heard about all around the state of teachers paying for their own materials in the classroom. Okay, so that's what the funds can go towards. The other really important element of the initiative is how it is paid for. The Quality Education Act makes two straightforward changes to the tax code. Number one, it restores the corporate income tax rate to what it used to be in Idaho. So not some unheard of new rate, but just to what it used to be, which is 8%. The income tax rate on C corporations, and we're not talking about LLCs or S corporations or most small businesses here, but C corporations, that tax rate is currently 6%. The Quality Education Act would restore it to 8%, which is the rate that it was from the year 1987 to the year 2000. So we would go back to where that rate used to be. And the second change and final change in the Quality Education Act is it would add an additional income tax just on the amount earned by an individual over $250,000 in a year. And it would add, and for a married couple, that would be $500,000 in a year. And it's really important to understand that new tax rate wouldn't apply to as soon as someone makes $250,000, it wouldn't just kick in on all their income. It would only apply to the amount they make above $250,000. So it wouldn't touch their first $250,000. I'll mention quickly here that as I mentioned earlier, perhaps you might have a question about this. Our opposition has pointed to an analysis that was written by a think tank based in Washington D.C. that's claimed that our initiative would in fact raise taxes on the lower income tax brackets as well. In our view, that is clearly wrong because, and this is, if you could just hang with me for a moment here, if you look at the text of the initiative, it's very clear that it is only that top tax bracket, the $250,000 level, that is underlined in the initiative. What our opponents are arguing is that, well, what happened was the lower tax brackets in our initiative are actually going to result in a tax increase because during the time that we were circulating the initiative, there was a tax cut passed by the Idaho legislature. So our initiative is actually going to move us back to the tax rates that existed before the tax cut. Well, it is, in our view, that is clearly a misreading because if you look at the language of the initiative, it's only the upper bracket that's underlined and not all the lower brackets. And what the opponents have ignored is that that is the legislative drafting system in Idaho, is that you only it's only the part of a bill that's underlined that changes the code. And we've got confirmation on this from the leading expert on legislative drafting in Idaho, someone named Mike Nugent, who served as the chief bill drafter for the Legislative Services Office for 26 years before retiring. And he's come out saying that this initiative will in fact do exactly what it's designed to do, which is only raise taxes on C corporations and Idahoans earning over $250,000 a year. So the big picture is that this initiative is all about strengthening K-12 programs, keeping more of our teachers and our support staff in Idaho and in education. What really motivates us, what really motivates me, is just a worry that we're not giving our kids the opportunities they deserve. It really hurts our kids when we're 50th out of 50 states in funding for education, which is what we currently are. It really hurts our kids that we're currently funding K through 12 education at 58% of the national average. And the reason it hurts our kids is primarily because it means that too many of our programs are underfunded and too many of our teachers and our support staff are not being paid competitively. And we know that it's basic economics that if you don't pay people competitively, they won't do the work. They won't stay in that profession. And we want to do something about that. So that's the goal of the Quality Education Act. With that, I will stop and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Luke, you didn't tell us what the new rate might be for that income tax for that higher.
It's 10 point,
It was 10.
isn't it 10.9%?
Yep, 10.925. So up from 6, which is it's currently 6, and it would be up to 10.925. Again, only on the amount that's earned above $250,000. So no new taxes on the first $250,000.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Luke?
How about how do you determine the disbursement? How's it going to be paid out to districts?
Well, if you look, there's a section in the initiative that spells that out, and it's using the exact same language as current funding formulas that distributed on a per student basis. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
A couple questions. what would prevent if this were to pass, what would prevent the legislature from reducing funding $323 million? So it's just a flat equal to where we are today.
That's a good question. So we anticipated that. We did put in clear language in the initiative that all funds generated by this initiative shall supplement and not replace existing funds. So we put a really clear clause in the initiative. However, part of the political reality in Idaho is that the legislature does have the power. They could repeal that section of the initiative. Frankly, they could repeal the entire initiative. The legislature, the initiative process is fairly limited in Idaho. You can pass an initiative, but the legislature does then have the power to react to it pretty much in the way that they want. So we did put that clause in the initiative, but the main goal of that clause is just to make it very clear to legislators and to the public what the intention of the initiative is, and therefore what the intention of the voters is if the voters go ahead and vote for it. And the only real answer to your question of what happens if the legislator does that is that supporters of the initiative and supporters of more education funding in Idaho are going to need to really speak up and say, no, that's not what we voted for. We didn't vote to keep funding flat. We voted to increase funding by $323 million. And that might be an unsatisfying answer, but it's really the only answer available. And just as a quick point I'll make is this is the same kind of question we would get when we were working on Medicaid expansion, is that, we'd have meetings and we're trying to recruit people to work on the initiative, and people would say, well, what's to stop us from doing all this work? And then the legislature just turns around and repeals it. And all we could really say is the same thing that I just now said, which is that, look, we can win the vote for this, do the work to win this initiative, but that's only the first step. After that, we've got to make sure that we speak up and let our legislators know that this is what we voted for, this is what we want. And it turns out with Medicaid expansion, it worked. There were a number of legislators who tried to repeal it, but they didn't get very far because most of the legislators actually respected they actually respected the will of the voters. So they implemented the Medicaid expansion program, and it's now working. And we think we could get a very similar result with this initiative. And at the very least, we're willing to work hard for it because we believe it's needed.
Yeah, but if I were to summarize what you just said, you tried to put in language to put your intention, but in the end, if the legislature only budgets $323 million lower, that's the budget. You're still supplementing it, but it's still a lower budget. So to summarize what you said, there's nothing to prevent the legislature from doing that, correct? So it's a net zero.
Yeah, and there's nothing, frankly, there's nothing to prevent the legislature from repealing the entire initiative. But that doesn't mean that we're powerless, because we still have a very strong message in the event that we win the vote, which is that the voters of Idaho just now voted to increase funding by over $300 million a year. If the legislature turns around and keeps funding flat, they have directly gone against the will of the voters. And we think that is difficult for them to do that, to turn around and vote the opposite way of the people who put them into office.
Yeah, it's really easy to spend someone else's money, though. It's really easy to vote yes to tax someone else when you're not impacted. And I think that's what legislators have to look at. But I got a separate question on that. It's not even so much a question, but it's a comment. Luke, if you really want to help schools, I mean, I think this is, I understand what you're trying to do here. My personal opinion is, I don't think this is a a great solution, but I like your ideas and where you're going. But if you really want to help schools in Idaho right now, where you and your organization of Reclaim Idaho could jump in and help, is that would be addressing the supermajority requirement to keep up with growth and build new schools. This measure does nothing to help us build new facilities. It doesn't give us the money we need to build new facilities. Idaho is only one of 2 states in the entire nation, Idaho and Kentucky, that require a supermajority, roughly 67% of the population, to approve a bond to be able to go to construction to build new schools. I can meet with you and talk to you about 4 or 5 options that other states have adopted. But that's what we need the most, not just District 91, but every district that's growing beyond belief. CUNA, District 93, Rigby, Jefferson County, I guess is the name of their district, Madison. And I'm not familiar with all of the Boise districts, but I'm sure they're experiencing the same problems. We need help being able to get the funds necessary to build schools. And we need help addressing this supermajority issue, which is an antique law on the books that worked great a century ago, but it's irrelevant today because you're never going to get the public 67% of anybody to approve, to be on the same page of something. But yet our school district is struggling. I can name dozens of school districts that are struggling, especially in Idaho, when we're one of the fastest growing countries in the nation.
Yep.
Sorry. Well, I feel like we're a country. One of the fastest growing states in the nation. Thanks, Larry. And we can't keep up with the growth.
Yep.
We haven't added square footage to our school district since 1991, 31 years ago. Look at the, I don't know how, where'd you say you're calling in from? Sandpoint. Idaho Falls, I don't know what I need to find this data. I don't know what the population was in 1991, and I'm not certain what it is 31 years later today, but I know it's a drastic increase. But yet our school district hasn't increased the square footage of our facilities or added additional facilities in those 31 years, and we're hurting, and we can't get bonds approved because, to be honest with you, people have the attitude of, I'm not going to approve something if it helps only the other people on the other side of the district. It doesn't influence my kids, so I'm going to vote no. And so we need help addressing that issue. And so I would plead for your organization to look at that and address that, because if you really want to help schools, I see what you're doing here. But where we really need help is addressing the supermajority required in order to go to bond to build new facilities.
Could you just tell me your name so I know who I'm speaking to? Sorry about that.
Sorry. Yes, my name is Paul Hackey.
Okay, Paul. So, thank you for that. And what I want to say is that I just want to urge us all to not think of that as an either or proposition, because both of these issues are extremely important in our view. And I will tell you that I've had several meetings with people in the early stage of the process when we were trying to determine what kind of initiative that we could put forward that would help the most. I had several meetings with people about precisely the issue that you're talking about of the supermajority requirement. But here's where the rubber meets the road when it comes to the supermajority requirement. Unfortunately, it's not just, this is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just that it's a law on the books, as you said, it's that it's in the Idaho Constitution. And in Idaho, you cannot change the Constitution with a voter initiative. The only way to change the Constitution in Idaho is for the legislature to propose a constitutional amendment, which then goes before the voters. So that's where we hit a clear dead end on that issue. If we hadn't hit, if it were possible to repeal the 2/3 provision, the supermajority provision, with an initiative, We may or may not already be working on it, but I will tell you, we probably would have that lined up to work on in the future. We might have even chosen that one as the first one to work on. But unfortunately, we depend on the legislature to take action on that one. And as far as we can tell, the majority in the legislature is not willing to touch that, unfortunately. So I hope that helps, at least to convey that it's not that we don't care about that issue. The people who've designed this initiative, we care deeply about the problem of a 2/3 majority to build and rebuild schools. But again, I will say, I would urge us all to not think of this as an either or, because there is very clearly, in our view, a dire need, not just for building new buildings or rebuilding old buildings. There's also a dire need for operational expenses in the classroom. We're looking at the latest report on teacher salaries has the average Idaho teacher salary $27,000 behind Washington State, $16,000 behind Oregon, $8,000 behind Wyoming, and also at least a few thousand behind every other neighboring state. And then if you look at the salary, compare the teacher salaries to salaries of other professions that teachers can go into, it looks really bleak in that area as well. And I'm seeing it in the school district I grew up in. Every so often there's yet another story of a great qualified, experienced teacher either leaving the profession or moving out of state, and that's a tragedy in our view. So we do need to address buildings, but we also need to address what's happening in the classroom.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if your numbers there include cost of living differences between, those states or not. But I'll add this, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, Luke, because we can pay our teachers drastically more, but if they have 40 students in their classroom, it doesn't matter what we pay them, they're still not gonna teach.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because no one wants to have kids in their classroom.
And we're also aware that salaries aren't the only reason that teachers leave. I will say, though, on the cost of living, that has been something that legislators have often brought up my understanding is, over the last decade or so, when the issue of teacher salaries come up, legislators often bring up the issue of cost of living in Idaho versus neighboring states. That argument has really taken a big hit in recent years, though, because what we're seeing is that cost of living in Idaho has skyrocketed, right? So in Kootenai County, for example, which is just over the border from Spokane County in Washington, it's just as expensive now to buy a house in Kootenai County as it is in Spokane County. And we're seeing similar dynamics in eastern Idaho compared to Wyoming and elsewhere around the state. So the cost of living argument isn't really working anymore. And it's making for an even more severe problem than we had in the past.
Other questions for Luke? All right, that was a lot of information that we just received. Thank you so much for giving us a clearer picture of what this referendum looks like. We appreciate that.
Thank you all so much. And you can learn more about the Quality Education Act by checking out qualityed.org. And you can also learn about upcoming events that we have around the state. Am I getting this right? There is, you have a park, is it called Freeman Park?
We do, yes.
Okay, so we're going to be in Freeman Park at 10 a.m. on Saturday, if anyone's interested in coming out and learning more about the initiative there, or learning about ways that you can get involved.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Questions on superintendent report? Sorry, but things need to get done. Of course, in our last meeting, we talked about a parent concern process. And it was supposed to be portrayed to parents during fall meeting. I've talked to parents at both, I haven't been to any, just for the record, so this is second hand. But I have reached out to parents at both Skyline and IF, and no one was aware of the parent appeal or concern process. I don't think it's been addressed in any of our meetings.
My understanding it has. Dan, would you like to respond?
All I can tell you is we've had the conversation that those parent concern procedures need to be addressed after the opening meetings. Great, I'm sure you did.
For IF, as part of our registration process, the parents and the athlete have to read the document that specifically addresses parent concerns and electronically sign it.
Does it go through the process of talking to the coach, to the AD, to the principal?
Yes, it does. It's lined up step by step.
And where do parents see this?
It's a part of the registration packet that they fill out at the start of every year.
And they have to sign that.
Like the Google
Electronically
Docs,
sign it,
you know,
yes.
that you do for sports registration. Like you go out and it's got like all the consents, right? Like
Yeah,
all
the
the
same place
medical consent and.
We use a program that's called Register My Athlete, and it's the same place that they go to print off the physicals and the other consent forms that we have to have in order for them to be part of an athletic program.
I thought it was going to be part of the meeting based on our discussion. If we're just relying on parents to read all the fine print, I can see why they skipped it and why they're unaware. But I thought based on our meeting, it was supposed to be part of a discussion in the meeting that was supposed to take place for fall sports. So we're failing that because just to say it's in a Google Doc, that's 3 pages. Yeah, we can blame the parents for not reading the Google Doc, but they're unaware.
It's all
And that was the concern of the meeting that was brought up is parents are unaware.
in the individual sport meetings that my coaches had. It was also brought up in there, at least in the ones that I heard. I wasn't there for the entire part of all 6 sports that had meetings and stuff, but it was also addressed in there.
Okay, so I asked a couple of your parents
Okay.
if they heard it and they said, "What's that?"
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whatever was communicated wasn't communicated very clearly.
Okay.
Second question. Facilities. I've raised this, I think, no less than 4 times. I'm tired of our community who pays for our facilities to be locked out of our facilities. It's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. What can we do? What message can we send? I know where you stand on it. I'm grateful for it.
Locked out in which way? I'm
We're not
confused.
allowing them to use facilities. A
Like a gym.
softball field, a gym, locking up gates. It sits empty. How can we communicate to the administration that these facilities are owned by the public, by the patrons, and if they're available, they should be able to be used by those patrons? How do we communicate that to these administrators? Because it's been brought up before, and I'm bringing it up again and again and again.
So what recently have you heard hasn't been open?
Softball field,
At which field?
Skyline.
Mr. Basics right here.
Why is it locked? Why are we not letting people use it?
Because it was actually vandalized this summer. We had some bases that were out. And they were stolen, so we locked it up.
Well, we've left bases out all winter long. We should, when the season's over, we should collect those bases and put them in the shed.
The city also uses the field as well, so we have to share with them.
So I can understand locking it up when it's not being used, when it's requested to be used. Why would we not want that facility being used by future Skyline kids instead of saying you can't use it and it sits empty?
Sure.
Well, don't say sure
Who
because
was-
you didn't allow
who's-
them
who's
to
your-
use the field.
Mr. Hackman.
Because you were texted and you were told, you told them you were gonna stand by the coach and not allow them to use the field.
It's true.
Why?
Just to prevent it from being vandalized.
So you thought this team that was gonna practice there was gonna vandalize the field?
I just didn't want to leave it open.
You couldn't tell the coach, I'll open it for you, please lock it when you're finished?
Yeah, that would be a good thing to address as well, Madam Chair, as far as how do we have a game plan for people to use the outside of our facilities as far as the lights, things like that.
Right. Is there a scheduling process that can somehow be seen so that people know when they could potentially come and use
There is for inside.
for inside, but not for
And,
outside?
and you
spaces?
can't, and they can use it for free, but there are waivers to be signed mostly for insurance purposes. So if you want to come in and practice in our gyms, you have to fill it out. You don't have to, if you have liability, we ask you provide it, but you can waive. So we do allow clubs to use our facilities for free, but we do make them fill out the form, and it's mostly because Morton requires us to do that. Because if something happened to someone in our gyms, but for outside, I don't know. I don't know why we couldn't add it. Does that make sense? Because it's just a process with the school to arrange for use.
I just find it frustrating because we're asking the public for $250 million and then we're basically saying, but don't use the facilities we're asking you to pay for. You're not allowed to use them.
Yeah, and I know there's a process
I
to use
wouldn't
the
vote
inside,
yes
but
for
outside.
that. Why would I give you money to go build new gyms, new fields and so forth if I can never use them?
I think part of the question is most of our fields are accessible, correct? I mean,
Yes.
what field can't we get to? But we had an incident where it was determined to lock the gate, and I think that's probably what we need to talk about is why did we take that measure to lock that field? And if it's not what we want to do, then we need to walk through that.
I don't have a concern about locking the field.
Well,
I have a
if
concern.
everything else is open,
Yeah, but I have a concern when someone says, can I use the field? Will you unlock it for me? And the answer is no. We're just going to allow no one to use that field. I just don't understand that.
Well, that's why I think maybe there should be a scheduling process, no matter what the situation is that you're gonna use. So
I
those
agree.
public,
I agree with you, but this wasn't a scheduling conflict.
sure,
This was just you're not allowed to use the field. So I agree with you, but I'm just saying that doesn't alleviate this issue. We need to alleviate this issue because it keeps rearing its head up and it's incredibly frustrating. It's not being addressed.
so the reason for its locking was vandalism, that's what it was, but there was a request that came in, can we use the field? And the answer was no, because of this incident. I think that's a fair question. I think we're gonna have to work through that a little bit, especially when all the other fields are open. You can go over to any of our fields right now and use them.
But if we're going to replace common sense with board policy, as big as our manual is, it's going to triple in size.
Well, I'm not suggesting policy around this particular.
I'm suggesting common sense. Can we have common sense?
I don't know the situation, Mr. Hackey, and in fact,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I would say that we have got to let our athletic directors and our principals be able to make decisions based on
Right.
what they
Real-time
feel
decisions.
is important at the time. At some point, we're gonna have this brand new football field out there. And if some vandalism's done there, we're gonna lock that thing down for a while, even if the best intention people wanna come in. It's just gonna have to be at their discretion. So I think there's times we're gonna have to make those decisions.
That's my concern though, is your athletic director did make that decision.
And
And-
at that point, he felt that was a correct decision.
Yeah, that no one can use the facilities. You feel like that's the correct decision? Can you look at me? I'm asking you the question.
If you wanna talk to the chairman, I'll be happy to visit with her.
Can you have that question addressed, please?
I think that this is not the time or the place for this discussion. This is all in internal inner workings within the district, not,
Yeah, but it's things that have been brought to, it's not important.
no.
Our facilities aren't
No,
important.
it's not for a discussion tonight. It's an important discussion that needs to happen between the
It's an
administration,
issue that's
not
been
the
brought
board.
to my attention that hasn't
I
been
understand that,
addressed.
Paul.
So I'm bringing it up in the superintendent report and asking it to be addressed.
But it wasn't part of his report. We're straying from the agenda and we're getting completely off topic for the
Okay,
meeting
then I'm
tonight.
asking it to be put on the agenda for our next meeting.
After they've been able to address it within the district.
It's been
and
brought
then-
up 4 or 5 times and it hasn't gotten
Well,
better.
this is the first I'm hearing of you getting these text messages and people being locked out of facilities.
Well, it's been brought up in this meeting before. It was Eagle Rock
Jim, but I think it was addressed.
And we addressed those issues.
after 3 or 4 times. So let's put it on the agenda for next meeting then.
Noted. All right, so then moving on to the next agenda item would be bond outreach.
Hillary, would you please?
Let's start. Okay, well, so Paul and I are going to be the joint liaisons for the campaign committee moving forward. That's working on getting formed, so there's not a lot of updates yet. Part of it is we'll be doing kind of some back end work there, getting things going, and then once we have, the final numbers, we'll start seeing some more push there from the board. I think part of that is, as we're moving forward and asking people to donate time, that, we need to maybe make sure everybody is still on the same page with the bond. Everybody's feeling like we're heading in the right direction, we're focused, that, we're 100% committed to, what we're asking the community and, the people that we're asking to do this outreach. And so just kind of verifying that everybody's still feeling good. Okay, Larry, give me a head nod. Got a comment?
Just looking at something here.
And then, once that committee's formed, they'll be reaching out, different things to each of the board members individually, not as
Not as a
board per se. Laura, any discussion you're concerned about?
No, I'm starting to see some of the educational pieces, at registration there. Margaret's getting some of that out, which is good. I saw people taking them at registration, both at Taylorview and at IF today. So hopefully just educating the public on our needs, the needs that this district has. These aren't wants.
And I think that's really the key, to me, as I've kind of been processing through stuff and looking at the outreach portion, that this isn't a want. We are at an apex where sadly all of these things are now needs and requirements. We missed the opportunity, 4 years ago to maybe ease into some things. And so where we are is where we are, and it's not going to get better. It's not going to remedy itself. And we've got to figure out a way to make it work. Dr. Shank, anything you want to bring up on it at all, or?
Yeah, very good. I think that we've talked about the plan quite a bit. I think the plan is a good plan. There's no question that's what it was that the community said that they need in our schools. And so that's what it is that we need to continue to present to our public is this is the plan. This is how much it's going to cost. And walk through each of the questions that they may have about the plan. I think our public needs to get into our schools and see Idaho Falls High School and see Skyline High School. They need to experience it and know what that's like.
In particular, Skyline, I think we can see a lot of things without students there. I think IF demonstrates some of its greater issues when it's full of students, but I know that also presents some security risks or, intrusions. Do you have any suggestions for people that would like to experience it fully?
Yeah, we would certainly, I believe Dr. Powell's here with us tonight, but he and his staff are already preparing tours.
Okay.
And so they're happy to
Great, thank
entertain
you.
people that would like to come in and see the school. And I believe they really want to show it. Is that right? Am I misrepresenting?
Okay, perfect.
Well, and even today at registration with my freshmen, obviously, I went to school here, you went to school here, my older son went to school here, but we didn't have the modulars out back. He did have classes at the stadium. There were people like, wait, what? They're looking at the maps going, what's M2? Well, it's the modular. It's right here. My daughter was walking around getting familiar with the lay of the land, and I just sat there and let her kind of do that. And modular, what's that? I'm like, it's that building right outside that door there. And where's the stadium? What is that? I'm like, you have to cross the field, which was full of water, by the way, Saturday after that deluge. So those that think that we can just build out over our swimming pool, that's not going to happen. Not a possibility. So yeah, I think that education piece and drones, GoPros on your tallest kid's head that can give a clear picture of what this building, and even Skyline too, when you turn on too many lights or,
Classroom.
in a classroom, try to plug in stuff and you're shutting down the whole building with the electrical there now. That's gonna have to help sell it for us, for sure. So. Right. Okay. Yes, that leads us to Angela and the finance update.
So,
Is this your?
so yes, this was handed out by the state, and I'm not gonna read it to you, as part of the state meeting I had last week, as well as when we went to the Idaho, administration, because they were asked to form a committee about the funding formula. There'll be a lot of questions, especially because we have so many new legislators this year. And this is just kind of what the STE prepared to give us in our finance meeting, and it just covers how we're funded. And you're probably gonna get a lot of questions as we head into the legislative season. They want suggestions for how it could be changed. I happen to be on some of the committees and things that they did at the beginning when I started at the school district when we were looking at a new funding formula. There aren't a lot of good answers to the question about funding, but I thought it might be helpful for you guys to, because people might ask you questions. We have some legislatures in our area that are asking questions, and this kind of tells you how our funding formula was built. And, as business managers, we kind of look at it and go, yeah, it's confusing, but when they tried to start from the ground up, it got really confusing really fast. There is no probably super clean solution to the problem. But sometimes it helps if you walk in knowing how it works now. But they are looking for people who have suggestions or ideas, because obviously that's going to be a real hot topic as we go into the season. The governor did extend our funding for this year as well on enrollment. So we know at least through 2023 what our funding looks like, but the discussion has come up because obviously then we have to make a decision. So I just thought I would give you guys that piece that they gave us, because it to me, I've worked in it a few years, but I was like, somebody managed to get it on 2 pages. That's pretty cool. Because when we prepared the budget, it's about 7. The other thing was they are going to ask for an additional appropriation for the additional students in Idaho. Statewide, it's 508 units is the anticipated growth. So obviously that's new. They did that for the first time last year so that we would not have any budget shortfalls. So that was good news. The only kind of sad news we got was the economic disadvantage number statewide is very, very low compared to previous years. But that number is based on free and reduced lunch applications, of which we were not required to provide. People who were directly certified through Health and Welfare, of course, showed up, but we've been feeding kids for free for 2 years, regardless of whether they filled out the application. So obviously there's a shortage of applications. So they are giving us until September 15th to try to get that number where it should be. Right now we're sitting about a 31%. Traditionally we're closer to 45 to 50. It would mean about a $500,000 cut to K3, which with all day kindergarten would be painful. But Margaret's done a really good job of getting the postcards out or encouraging parents to fill out the applications. Once we do the back to school nights, we're going to try to see who's left and see if we can reach out to classes and parents and, go through principals to try to get as many as we can. We don't feel like we've dropped. I mean, a lot of very rich people might have moved into Idaho Falls, but we think we're probably closer to where we were before COVID. So we're going to try to really hard to get that fixed, because with all day kindergarten, we really want that piece to stay and to be well funded. And also I know I dwell on the K3 because we use that to pay for kindergarten, but also kids aren't going to get to eat this year if they don't have the application or if they have a lunch count. So one item we'll be preparing and having for you hopefully in September is we do have to every year inform our parents of our policy of charging. And child nutrition has asked us to look at a policy that is a little more lenient than we've had in the past, mostly to give parents a chance to
Ease back in.
and not like immediately get a cheese sandwich. And I think that we can probably do that with semester funding to offset if someone doesn't end up funding their account rather than taking food away from kids. There is a bit of a learning curve where people have just been able to show up and eat. I'll tell you a good example of Sunnyside traditionally is not very well, not a lot of people eat hot lunch there. They were up to about 600 kids a day, which is 3 times probably what they did pre-COVID. So I do think that we can get people back into the habit and hopefully keep, good numbers. But I think we probably want to be kind as we transition. So we'll have a proposal for you because we do have to then give that to parents because it's, part of policy, what we'll do if they need to charge a lunch rather than have funds. And then the last thing was they are going to ask us to report on how much we're spending on health insurance. Since they divided the discretionary into health insurance and traditional discretionary. We, of course, opted into the state pool, so we should not have any issues with that report, but they're requiring that by December so that the legislature can, of course, make some decisions about how much to fund for health insurance. So those are the updates they gave us. The auditors will be here one more week in August, and then we should have the audit report in October on time this year instead of, April. But so far, everything's looking really good. The only slight mar is K-3. You have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You receive any patient input? No. All right, Emily. Welcome.
So I'm Emily Eichley. I'm a second grade teacher at Edgemont, and I'm just here representing the IPA because Julie could not be here tonight. So just sharing with you, we've been in full swing all summer. There's no rest for the wicked. So Julie and myself are co-chairing the new teacher event, the new teacher luncheon on the 16th, which you should have all received invitations to. Love to have you there, but the two of us and about 8 other teachers have worked all summer long to request and gather donations from local community businesses, and they are so excited to sponsor us and welcome these new teachers. And so we've got what I can only compare to celebrity gift bags. We've got goodie bags ready for all these teachers. We just stuffed them up yesterday. 2 days ago, Monday. Sorry, I don't have a schedule yet. So they're amazing. They're like $150 bags. It's so cool. So yes, we would love to see you there. And our other events are already set for the year for teacher outreach and for new membership. And then as always, Children's Fund, which is near and dear to us. So we've got those dates down and you should get invitations to all those. We would just love to invite you as board members to our events just so we can show our relationship with these new teachers that united.
Right?
No, I think it's gone up since then. The beginning of summer it was 75, and then it went to 85. 88 was the last one.
I was just gonna ask what number.
But it changes constantly. So we are, as we asked, we were just asking for 100 because we know a lot of last minute changes happen.
Very good.
Any questions?
Thank you so much, Emily.
Hope to see you there.
Right, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions regarding?
Yeah, I have questions. Some questions on the Compass Academy purchase. We heard earlier that we have enrollment of 495 students. They want $10,000 worth of yearbook cameras, 6 cameras. That's 1 camera for every 85 students, I think, roughly 90 students, give or take. We really need $10,000 worth of cameras for 500 students.
It's only 6,950.
But it's that's the matching, isn't it?
It's the total.
That's the
900 is
total
the
amount.
for all of the schools.
Include the drone repair.
The six,
Of $1,000.
Compass Academy photography equipment is $6,950. That's the total amount of matching funds. So some of it is matching funds and some of it is their other donations. The
Exactly.
9,000 is total. There's Eagle Rock has some yearbook stuff too.
Yeah, I know they had drone, $1,000 for a drone repair also.
Yes, that includes their,
That includes the drone repair. I don't know, it just seemed a lot. 6 cameras. For a student body of 500. I don't know how big their yearbook staff is. They don't have sporting events. They don't have a lot of things. I think they need cameras. I think they need a yearbook event. I don't know what they have. It just seems like a lot personally.
Certainly technology costs a lot of money. And that's the request from the school. They would indicate if they were here. I don't see that Shelley's here tonight. But that's what's necessary for them to be able to have a quality program. So
It's for a photography class.
It's not just yearbook.
Yeah, I'm just reading Shelley's email. So they're using yearbook funds for the match part of it in the grant, and then it's for a class is what it looks
see.
like, but
And it's not just the cameras, it's for lenses and spare
Yeah,
batteries
spare
too.
batteries,
I mean,
yeah.
you really need 2 batteries per camera. So you can have one charged and then when the one dies, you put the
Yeah,
other
I
one
don't know.
in.
My camera battery lasts a couple of days. I use it all day long. But okay, but that makes sense, Hillary.
yeah,
I
at least
just
it's a
saw the
class,
camera,
not just
the
yeah.
yearbook. And I thought it seemed excessive for a yearbook.
I've done some macro photography and you can actually wear out a battery in about an hour of like really zooming in on something.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade. Yes.
Flowers like up close or like if you want to photograph jewelry or something like up close, that's macro. And you can, like, I can wipe out a camera battery in about an hour of like intense macro photography.
You should use copper.
They do have an amazing photography teacher who is leaving this year, but their program's second to none.
Okay, I appreciate that, Hillary. Thanks, and Elizabeth.
Did you have another
Nope,
question?
that was it.
Okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, special education math curriculum proposal. Okay. Welcome, Andrea.
You have my sheet in board policy or in your board packet. So I won't go through everything that's on here unless you want me to. We are seeking the board's approval to begin an adoption process for a special education specific math curriculum that will align with our content standards and align with the general education math curriculum that was adopted K-8 last year. Any questions or things I can answer that are not on the sheet, clarification?
So I have a question. Is this for a new supplemental math program or exactly what will this curriculum do? That wasn't clear to me from your sheet.
No, and I think it's because it's a little bit, is it an adopted curriculum or is it a supplemental program? Yes, I think is the answer to that question, because we don't want to bind our special education teachers to using only this special education math curriculum, because we may have some students who are served on IEPs for math that are performing close enough to what we're doing in the general education classroom that they may be better served with some of those intervention materials that are found in Into Math. However, in conducting that needs assessment, it was found that Into Math does not possess enough of the intervention materials or enough of the direct instruction components that a good chunk of our special education students will need in order to access their goals and objectives. So it's really both. We seek it to be both an adopted curriculum for special education as well as a supplemental resource for special education. Is that still as clear as mud?
Yeah.
And I think that that's hard because our students are
as diverse as possible. And the abilities and the unique needs and challenges that they come to the table with are difficult to put in a box.
So this would basically be an adopted curriculum that would be available for use by special needs students or to supplement what is being done in the general ed curriculum based on the needs of the student.
So we're not suggesting that it would be used by general education teachers. We're suggesting that this would be the resource for resource room teachers and or special programs teachers to use realistically, probably in the vast majority of cases for when the general education curriculum does not meet the needs of students on IEPs. I think maybe I said that wrong the first time around. I think that Into Math won't probably meet the needs of most of our students on IEPs, which is why we're seeking approval to begin the process of selecting a special education math curriculum. We just don't want to close the door on Into Math.
So it's available. It would be
Into Math is
available.
available?
No, whatever curriculum we choose would be, how would you decide which children, maybe I should ask my question differently. How would you decide which children are using Into Math and which children are using this supplemental? And it's not just going to be supplemental. It's going to be their
Right.
math curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would like for it to be their math curriculum. What we're currently using as the special education math resource is not adequate. And so in reality, what you have is a lot of teachers creating their own materials, getting things online, teachers pay teachers, buying materials that aren't necessarily research-based or vetted or evidence-based. And so we would like the selected special education math curriculum to be the resource. But there may be cases where you have a student it's not common for a student that's served on an IEP to be performing really, really close to general education standards. Otherwise, why do we have those goals and objectives? But there are certainly legitimate cases where that could happen. And so we don't want to close the door on Into Math, but by and large, we want to have an adopted special education math curriculum that would be the resource for teachers. And then we're closing the door on things like teachers pay teachers and books you
Right.
read on
And
Amazon.
I know what teachers pay teachers is, but for the rest of the board, can we just explain quickly what teachers pay teachers is? Because it's not a vetted curriculum source.
It's not a vetted curriculum. It's basically Pinterest for teachers. So teachers create
And a bit of Etsy.
worksheets and we're creating, and a lot of times they're quality materials. I don't mean to necessarily, but they're not necessarily research-based and vetted materials, and we don't want our teachers going down that road because they're not vetted and research-based and they're not adopted and it's not a curriculum.
And
It's great
our
for
job
bulletin
to
boards.
provide curriculum, so we should probably do that.
Please.
Just to give you a little background, a lot of times historically, the special education department would do their own research, find a curriculum and purchase it. But Andrea and I talked, and we want to make sure that every adoption that we do follows a process. We work together, it comes before you guys, even if it's for a smaller subset of students. So that's why we're doing it this way.
Yes, thank you. And I think in the past, a lot of special education materials have been considered supplemental, but we would love to have the board's backing in calling this our adopted curriculum.
What's the timeframe? When would you hope to have this available for the teachers
All told, we're shooting for October.
for this school?
Other questions for Andrea?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Does that take an action on first to let it happen
It's a proposal this evening.
so it will come
Later.
back.
next meeting?
All right, the new course proposal from Eagle Rock. Is that Ethan or?
So our new course proposal is a student leadership class or student council, or student government per se. one of the things as we did our HRS surveys with the students and things like that was many of our, and some of the results from our culture and everything was that, you know, students didn't feel like they had a voice in the school, as much of a voice. And we've had a student leadership, kind of like a volunteer type organization that's, you know, met after school, maybe once or twice a month and stuff like that. But as the year goes on, we found that it kind of loses its steam and, you know, less and less kids keep participating in it and everything like that. So what we wanted to do was have more of a formal course for those students. So they can take place, but they can take part in the election process as well. They can, you know, vote for their peers. They can run, they can do those types of things. And yeah, that's basically, I mean, it'll mirror a lot of what the high school student leadership classes do and everything like that, but it'll give them a designated period each day for them to go in there. They'll be using, as far as the curriculum goes, it'll be, you know, focused on leadership, and they'll be using Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens was the curriculum. Is what we're proposing.
Questions for Ethan?
This, Dr. Shank, would this be an action item on the next board?
It would be.
Okay. I'll hold my, I have questions, but not for you, Ethan.
Okay.
It's on the district side, so I'll ask those later.
Okay, so just one question, would this be for like a second or third trimester to get it?
Yeah, so if we had, we would put it on for our second, third trimester. Our plans are.
You say
Yeah,
August?
moving forward, what's that?
Your document says it started in August.
It was, because we were hoping that we would have gotten it on the agenda back in June, so I hope that didn't happen. So, moving forward, we're hoping that we can, you know, start it up second and third trimester. With our 7th graders coming in, I mean, the way that we move forward is, moving forward, we have elections in the fall, or sorry, not in the fall, we'd have elections in the spring for the incoming 8th graders, for the soon-to-be 8th graders, and then for 7th graders, we do want representation there, but where we draw from 6 different elementary schools, we would use that first trimester for them to kind of get to know each other, get to know their peers, things like that, home election first trimester, and then the 7th graders would take it for second and third trimester. But for this year, it would be for that second trimester.
I had a question.
This is a proposal. I just want to be clear.
Question, Elizabeth? Yeah, the request was for a class set of books for 40 books. That seemed like a lot.
So as far as numbers and everything like that, I think it was, the goal was to have about 17 8th graders and then about 13 7th graders, 7th grader positions. So you have your president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then you have some club representatives, you have athletic representatives, things like that. So where we are looking at, it's probably closer to 30, but I think that's just to account for, you know, wear and tear and through the years and stuff like that, just to kind of keep us there as well. Closer to 50 books as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Ethan. Okay, that brings us to our first action item, employee 2022-2023A.
We have an employee that's resigned over the summer. They signed a contract to come to work with us for next year, and has received an employment offer from another institution. Given that it's in a resignation over the summer, we think that it's not per se as significant as it is during the school year. There is a replacement for this person. All is in order for that to occur, except we need to release them from contract. It's our recommendation to do so.
If I understand this correct, Dr. Shank, it's just a 1 year, it's almost like a leave, right? The way I read it.
No, it's a release from contract.
But just for 1 year, or for, like, they're not coming back. Like, we did another one where they took like that is not the case with this.
Yeah.
The way I read that letter, it sounded like it was just for this year.
Yeah, that's not my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, any comment?
No, he's leaving.
Okay.
All right. Anybody prepared with a motion?
That we release employee 2022 to any 23A from the contract.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, our safety busing zone recommendations. We've got Ralph here if anybody has questions. For Ralph, pretty straightforward, no changes this year.
No, there was the one change.
Just
Door,
one.
oh yeah, excellent.
That seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody prepared with a motion?
I'll move that we approve the 2022-2023 safety busing zone recommendations as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I did
have a question.
Absolutely.
It can be discussion now.
Yeah, I was just wondering on, the change with Dora Erickson. Are we going to keep the crossing guard at that crosswalk?
I don't think that's been determined yet. I was gonna ask Mr. Matzak to be sharing this evening. Discuss. Heard that first to see if anybody uses it. And make a decision.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the transportation agreement with American Heritage Charter School.
This is a renewal contract for us to provide transportation to the charter school. And it has been reviewed by the State Department. It's in order. They're stating that, and so we're ready to recommend that. It needs to be approved every year.
So I think we've done this years, several. It's not a new thing.
Anybody prepared with a motion?
Move that we approve the 2022-2023 transportation agreement with American Heritage Charter School.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight.